Story 1. The Mummy in My Uncle's Room. When I was a young child, around 6 years old, I often visited my uncle's house with my mom and grandmother. Each time I was there, I would make my way to my uncle's bedroom to see the mummy that always seemed to be lying on his bed. In my young mind, it looked like a woman wrapped in bandages or some kind of cloth. My uncle was a bit of a prankster, always trying to scare or tease me, so I assumed it was just another one of his tricks. Every time I saw the mummy, I would run to get my mom or grandmother, dragging them into the room to prove what I had seen. But no matter how many times I did this, they always insisted there was nothing there. No mummy, no woman, just an empty bed. It was frustrating, but I was convinced it was real. One day, after showing my mom and grandmother the mummy yet again, and once more being met with disbelief, I decided to stay in the doorway of my uncle's room and watch the mummy myself. I stood there, glaring at the figure on the bed as angrily as a little girl could, when suddenly, it sat up and turned to face me. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Then, as the figure began to rise from the bed, I found my legs again and bolted out of the room as fast as I could. Years later, my grandmother took a friend and me to my uncle's house while he was away. We decided to have a sleepover in his bedroom, the very room where I had seen the mummy. The room had been rearranged, and there was no sign of the mummy this time, but retelling the story to my friend was enough to freak us both out. That night, despite the spooky memories, we both managed to sleep. My mom and grandmother still remember me asking about the bandaged woman in the bed when I was younger, but they never saw what I did. To this day, I'm the only one who experienced the mummy in that house. Reflection in the mirror. It was a quiet evening, and I was alone at home while my parents were out. I decided to pass the time by exploring the house. As I wandered through the rooms, I ended up in the guest bathroom, where an old mirror hung above the sink. The mirror had been there for years, but I never paid much attention to it. That evening, as I looked into the mirror, I noticed something strange in the reflection. Behind me, I saw a shadowy figure that seemed to be moving closer. I turned around quickly, but the room was empty. My heart started to race. I turned back to the mirror, and the shadow was still there, now much closer. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light or my imagination. I turned away from the mirror and walked out of the bathroom. But the feeling of being watched never left me. I stayed in the living room for the rest of the evening, feeling uneasy. When my parents returned home, I told them about what I had seen. They dismissed it as my imagination running wild. But every time I pass that mirror, I can't shake the feeling that something is lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. In the attic. My family lived in a charming old house with a creaky attic that we rarely used. One summer, while my parents were away, my friends and I decided to explore the attic for fun. We had heard stories about the house being haunted, but we were too excited to care. With flashlights in hand, we climbed the stairs to the attic. The space was cluttered with old furniture, dusty boxes, and cobwebs. As we rummaged through the boxes, we started hearing faint footsteps echoing around us. We laughed it off, attributing the sounds to the old house settling or our imaginations. Then, one of my friends pointed out a strange, cold draft coming from the corner of the attic. We followed the draft and found a small locked door hidden behind a stack of old trunks. Curiosity got the better of us, and we managed to pry the door open with a crowbar. Inside, we discovered an old, forgotten room filled with vintage furniture and a large, ornate mirror. The mirror was covered with a dusty sheet. As we pulled the sheet away, the room seemed to grow colder. The reflection in the mirror showed us standing in the room, but behind us, a shadowy figure was barely visible. We quickly covered the mirror and fled the attic, terrified. We never went back up there again. My parents later told me that the attic had been sealed off for years due to strange occurrences. They had hoped to keep it a secret, but the phantom we saw was enough to confirm their fears.